Good morning, everyone. This is Leanne from Of Love and Shiplap and the founder of Sublimation Graphics and Tutorials here on Facebook. If you're joining us on YouTube, please be sure to come join our Facebook group. You'll find that link in the video description. And if you're catching us live on Facebook, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find all of our videos after they are live in our neatly organized playlist. Today we're going to be covering something that's pretty basic, but it is also something that pretty much everyone who's operating in a business online wants to know how to do. We're going to be covering how to watermark and also create mockups in Affinity Designer. Keep in mind that the tactics that are covered here may be able to be used in other design programs. And even though we do cover multiple design programs, if you're using one that we don't cover, watching the different videos that we offer is a great way to pick up on techniques that you might already know how to utilize and then put them to use to create your own mockups in that program. I'm working on Affinity Designer on a Windows laptop, so if you're using a Mac or an iPad, you may notice a few differences in the layout. I really don't know much about the Mac or iPad versions, so if you do find yourself having questions where things aren't quite the same, I highly recommend checking out the Affinity Designer group on Facebook. The first thing that we're going to do is open up a new document so we can get to work. We'll do that by going to File and clicking on New. We're going to set our document units in pixels, which can be done right here. And I prefer to already make mine in a square because thumbnails are used across most social media platforms and different types of websites, including Etsy, Shopify, and if you're building your own website. So if you already create your mockup in a square, you are ready to go and you don't have to worry about any part of your design being cropped out in a way that you do not want. I find that 1500 pixels by 1500 pixels is a good size. We want to make sure we have the transparent background option selected, and we'll go ahead and hit OK. Now the first thing that we're going to cover is how to create a watermark, and then I'll show you how to save that so that you can always use it in the future. To do that, the first thing that we need to do is import some sort of picture that needs to be watermarked. So I'm going to hit the Place Image tool. And I'm going to go ahead and select this mock-up photo that if you have the design membership and were able to get this adorable Easter bunny design, then you would have received a mock-up photo as well. Now, a lot of digital designers do provide mock-ups with their files just for you to be able to watermark for yourself. It is very important that you watermark anything that you're putting online simply to prevent theft. This is very common. Digital theft is just rampant. So one of the ways that you can protect yourself and those who you might have licensed a graphic or a photo from is by making sure that you adequately watermark something before you put it on the internet. Now, one of the little tactics that I also use is the mockups that I provide are purposely a lower resolution to, once again, make it difficult for someone to try and steal the graphic that's on here should someone not watermark. And I know a lot of designers do that as well. So the first thing that we want to do is we're just going to create a text layer that's going to cover our entire photo. So we'll do that by clicking on the Artistic Text tool, and we'll just click and drag. Now you can make this say anything that you want. If you've seen my personal mockups for my website, it has my business name, Of Love and Shiplap, in the script font that's used in my logo. You might just want to write do not copy. Really, it's kind of up to you what you choose to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and type something out here. I think that this one is funny. Now, obviously, this is a bit bigger than we need, so I'm going to just drag this over like that. And I'll go ahead and center this using my Align Center tool as well. I'm going to change the font because I don't really care for Arial, but honestly with a mock-up, there's no right or wrong way to do it. The goal is just to create a disruptive layer, so to speak, that makes it difficult for someone to steal your graphic. The next thing I'm going to do is just click all of my text and select my paragraph tool. And I'm going to increase the space between the lines because I don't want this to be completely inundated with text, but I do want to make sure that I have adequately covered the entire graphic. So if you are in the paragraph panel, which again is this little icon here that symbols a paragraph, you'll look under the spacing section, and when you hover over this, it says paragraph leading. That lets you know that that's the space in between the paragraphs. Since it's at 25, I'm going to try and go with 35, and we'll see how that looks. I think we could do a little bit more. There we go. 45 looks pretty good, so we'll stick with that one. So we'll exit out of our panel to close it. Now, obviously, this, as it is simply too dark, simply too bold, and it makes it very difficult to be able to see our graphic that's below. The way that we accommodate this is by changing the opacity. So first I want to make sure this is centered, and you can click on your graphic and click on the alignment tool up here and simply select to align it across the spread. And we'll do both of those. And that makes it very easy. So then the next thing we'll do is click on our little opacity drop down. You have to make sure that you have your text selected in the layers panel. And we'll just go ahead and decrease that slider. So 50% is still too much. And as we keep going down, we're looking for what kind of works best for us. So I find that somewhere between 10 and 20% is pretty ideal for most graphics. It will always depend on the background color of your graphic. So this one is very light. So that is something I have to take into consideration, that using black text will show up more. So 8% opacity looks pretty good as well, and that's a little bit less than I normally do, but I'm actually going to increase it right up to that, just around the 10, just because I do really like to make sure that everything is adequately covered. You know, like I licensed this photograph from someone off of Etsy, so I have to protect their work to make sure that someone doesn't come and remove this design and then use their photo without having paid the $4.50 or $5.50 that it was. And I, of course, want to make sure that my graphic is protected because that's my hard work. So two different things to consider every time you are either making your own mock-up or simply watermarking a mock-up that's been provided for you. Now you can absolutely use this just as it is and upload it to your website and social media. But I personally really recommend always adding your logo. And the reason why is because it's very easy for someone just to take this, which has generic text in the background if you chose not to use your business name, and export that, and then just them share it as well and claim it as their own work. So once again, trying to protect your effort, your work, the products that you're selling, and if you happen to have licensed graphics or provided a mock-up from a company that you licensed graphics from, you want to protect their work as well. So it's, you know, if everyone does their part, it really just helps decrease digital theft dramatically. And that is what our goal is. So the next thing that we can do is add our logo. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Place Image tool. And we'll go ahead and find my logo. We'll click on Open, and then once you get that little down arrow icon with the portal, you just click and drag to resize it. A lot of people will just set the transparency to their logo and partially cover a design, or they will not even include this background text that we create first, and they'll just put their logo like this in the corner. That is something you do not want to do. That is not adequate watermarking. And again, if you have licensed any part of this, if you have licensed the photo, if you have licensed the graphic, or if the entire mock-up was provided for you, the way that mine are with my designs, you need to make sure that you watermark the entire picture because this is what protects it. You know, I find it very frustrating when people don't because it does make it so easy for someone to steal that digital graphic or that photo. And again, that's what we're trying to prevent. Now, I purposely do my mockups in a lower resolution to even just further try and mitigate that in case someone doesn't adequately mock up. Now, you don't need your logo to be over the design. I used to do that and I realized it was really more disruptive than I wanted. So the text that we created, the "come on dude, don't be that guy," that text is not very disruptive. It's just enough. So that was one of the reasons why I changed the way that I did my mockups. But you still want to have your logo. Now, I really like putting my logo in the bottom corner. And what I do is I create a little background square that that just kind of highlights that my logo's there and just kind of makes it stick out a little bit more. So we'll click on our rectangle tool to do that. And I'm just going to click and drag. Now it's over top of everything. So we'll go over here to our layers panel and we'll just move it below. I know that some people really struggle with the layers panel. So basically the way you want to look at this is it's like layering a cake or making a sandwich. The things that are on top of each other from top to bottom, and that is how they are on top of each other in the picture. So if I drag this all the way below our bunny kisses mock-up, we wouldn't see it anymore. If I put it below the text, the "come on dude, don't be that guy," it would have that over top of it, which I don't want. And so I want it right above it, but I want it below my logo. Hopefully that was pretty easy to understand. Now, I actually like setting this rectangle to have just a little bit of opacity because I just think it looks nicer. Again, that aesthetic aspect of creating your own mock-ups is really up to you. It's not quite as noticeable on something like this because the background is all white, but if I was doing, if I was watermarking a mock-up that had a darker background, then that is something I would absolutely want to keep in mind. So I'll just decrease that to about 50%. Now from here, our mockup is complete. You could go ahead and export this and use this as your photo, and you would simply do that by going File, Export, selecting your PNG, our size is already ready to go, and hitting Export. When you hit Export, it's going to open up your documents, and then you can go ahead and save this. So I went ahead and exported that. Now, another thing that you want to do so that you can constantly reuse the same text and logo that you've already implemented is save your actual document. So we do that by going to File and clicking on Save As, and then we're going to just save this as our Watermark design file. I label anything that is a design file as a design file. It just makes it easier when I'm trying to find stuff. And now every time we need to watermark something, we already have our top layer in place and we can just click on the graphic, for example. And we can replace that image. So we could just delete that like this, hit the garbage can, and then click on another place image. At the time of this recording, this is one of our freebies of the week, so I'll just go ahead and use that. Now, once again, when I click and drag, it's actually going to show it on top, and we can click and drag that down below like that. And if you don't want to have to resize everything, you can click on your image and then click Replace Image. And then you can, again, just go and select another one, and it will automatically resize it to where you are. So we'll do our Drinks Well with Others design that was just released on my website. And then again, all we would have to do is hit File and Export, and we have automatically created our mockup. So if you need to mock up a lot of things, or if you need to watermark a lot of things at one time, this is a really easy way to do this. Now, the next thing we're going to do is show you guys how to create the mockups. So I'm going to delete the ready to go mockup that was already provided for us. And I'm going to click and drag all of this, and I'm going to right click and hit group. Now I'm going to double click on where it says group, and I'm just going to change this, the name of it, so that in the future when I'm using this file, I can say, okay, that's my watermark layer. If you're not super tech savvy, you can also always export just this layer and then use it in other programs. For now, I'm just going to kind of move this off to the side. I want you guys to be able to see it. That's why I'm going to move it off to the side. But normally in my own program, when I'm working on mockups, instead what I do is I hit the lock key and then I uncheck it. So this keeps it in place, but I can't see it. So actually I will leave it just like that, just so you guys can see this all in action. Now there are a couple of different ways that you go about creating a mockup. The first is you need to have some sort of a base photo. Affinity Designer has the capabilities of being able to open PSD files, which means that you can use smart mockups as well as just simple photo mockups. I'm going to show you both of those. So the first one is going to be using a simple photo mockup. So we're going to hit our Place Image tool. You can find mockups on Etsy, on Creative Fabrica, Design Bundles. I think Font Bundles might have some, Hungry JPEG, all of those websites, or you can create your own. I personally am not very good with photography, so I prefer just to buy these photos. They, they average anywhere between $1 or $2 to $5 for the most part, and they're all very professional. And when you put these in your shop, they look professional and they're much more eye-catching for your customers. So having a good mock-up is very important because that professional look photo is going to be the difference between someone buying your product and buying someone else's who's selling the exact same thing. If you do want to learn photography and how to take your own photos, I highly recommend you just hit up Google. There are so many helpful tutorials out there on styled photography, that's what it's called, to create a flat layout. Once again, this is not a forte of mine, and with that in mind that I'm not very good at it, I find it just more realistic to buy the mock-ups, try and get free ones if I see them as freebies of the week on any of those major sites I just mentioned, and if someone happens to be offering them for free. So I keep mine all in a folder called Mockup Links. Click on that. All right, I'm gonna do a t-shirt one for this. And you'll see I've got all these ones in here, and all of these most of them came from Etsy, honestly. These ones with the men, they came from Adobe, I believe, mostly because men's mockups are a little bit hard to find. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on one of them, and we're going to click and drag. Now, a lot of styled photography photos or flat layouts that you're going to find usually have some nice props, and they are in a rectangle and have a bit of a background. So hopefully you guys can see the border of my workspace. But I'm going to go ahead, and I like to make sure that people can really see the design well, which that's another thing that you kind of look for when you see the mockups that you're potentially going to purchase. Kind of keep an eye on whether or not it's created in a way that allows you to make it so the design will be nice and big for the individual to see. Some of them you have to resize to make them so much bigger that just to see the design kind of defeats the purpose. I like having the little accessories. It just adds a nice touch. So we want to make sure that this is our bottom layer, and our watermark layer is ultimately going to be on the top. So again, we're just going to click that and drag it below it so that it's the bottom layer so that we're prepared for the next step. So now we'll go ahead and hit our Place Image tool again because we're going to import our design. Now, you also want to be creating your own mock-ups anytime you find that, maybe you do different types of printing besides just sublimation, or you offer different colors. I pretty much always mock up anything that's a t-shirt design on a white t-shirt because I do specifically cater to sublimation. But you can, of course, add your own little text to those mock-ups to let people know that you have other colors and styles. I will definitely show you that in just a second. So we're going to set our graphic on there, and let me just zoom in so this is easier for you guys to see. All right, we'll set our graphic on there. One of the most important things when you're making a mock-up is to make sure that the sizing of the design is realistic to what the size would be and the placement in real life. So I always try and keep this in mind when I'm making my mock-ups, because you don't want someone to think that this design is going to be like this, a full chest, and then when you print it and ship it to them, it's this big. So just, again, something to keep in mind. I try and visualize what might be 2 to 4 inches from each side in real life, because generally that's about how far from each edge your design is going to be. And then same thing with coming down from the collar. You don't want to put it up here, and because one, that's horrible placement and someone might see that and actually deter them from buying your product. A good way to think about it is that if you have a design like this that has some height to it as well as width, you want to be centering it with the armpits. If you have something that's more of one text line, then you would want to make sure the top of that is in line with the armpits. And if you're not sure on how to kind of understand placement, I always recommend that you just look at what you're wearing. So as a woman, a design that the top of the design was in line with my armpit of my shirt is going to be on top of my chest above it. And it's going to look really awkward if it was just a design that only had one line or two lines versus one like I have on the screen right now that has some depth. So when this one is placed, it is going to be over top, top and bottom of my chest, which is appropriate placement for women. So I just try and keep these things in mind. Just, as you're trying to visualize the best way to get the best looking mock-up. I'm gonna just kind of move that to where about centered. And then what we want to do is adjust the opacity of our design just a little bit. I usually go down 10 to 15% for two reasons. One, when we export this out of Affinity Designer, it's going to look bolder than it does on screen. And two, we want to make sure that we are giving our customers a realistic look at what this will look like. So if this was a gray shirt, we would definitely want to make sure that we've incorporated using that opacity so that it picked up the gray color, because sublimation ink is translucent. So we'll click on our little opacity slider. We'll just go down. Like I said, I go somewhere between 10 and 15%. It kind of depends on the design. I think that 87% will work perfectly for this. So let me zoom out. And now the next thing that we're going to do is click on that checkbox on our watermark layer and see how everything looks. So this is going to be what we end up, oh, it looks like our watermark layer needs to be adjusted a little bit. You'll notice the little box here that's supposed to represent the rectangle behind my logo is kind of high up. So I'm just going to move that down, and I'm going to move my logo down. And because this is in a group, we want to click on them in the layers panel like I just did. I'm going to lock that background picture just so we don't accidentally move it while we're doing this. Now I think that the "come on dude, don't be that guy" all looks great. We can stretch it down a little bit if we want to cover the whole picture. I don't think it's too dark, but you might think it is. So again, you can just, as long as you have that text layer selected, you will go right up and you can adjust the opacity. Now, if this was a darker shirt, I might want to change the text to white since the black will blend in. So that's another thing. You would just go to the color panel and you could select a different color for your text. The red doesn't look bad. Blue, you know, really whatever works for you. So there's a lot of versatility and a lot of option to be creative when it comes to your mock-ups. And like I said, when it comes to watermarking and creating mock-ups, it's just about creating that more professional look for your business and protecting that intellectual property, whether it's yours or someone else's. So now we're ready to export our file. Keep in mind that what is inside of the square is what you're going to export. And if you have a hard time making sure everything's in there, you can't see that very well, you go to, you go to view and then, no, sorry. I don't normally, oh, here we go. You go to view mode, view and then view mode, and then click to canvas. And then that will make sure everything that you see is only what's on your canvas area that you're printing. So once again, we go to File and Export, and you're going to export your document ready to go. Now let's say you have multiple sizes that you offer. Then you might want to put some sort of a banner, or maybe you're having a sale. And you can do that really simply by just using a text tool and a shape tool. So we'll click on this little rectangle here. And this is the way that I like to do it. I just kind of put a little rectangle like this. Depending on what it is, sometimes it might be here on the bottom, but for garments particularly, I normally just put it at the top like this. I want it to stand out, so I'm just going to choose the color scheme of my logo, because again, part of branding is about keeping those colors in the color scheme that you use for your business. And then I'll go ahead and add text on top of that, and just more colors and styles available. Shrink that down a little bit. And obviously make that text black so that we can actually see it. There we go. It is always a good idea to add some sort of a graphic like this that says more colors and styles available, or, you know, men's and women's available, things like that, simply because it reiterates to your customer that there are other options, and it's going to get them to click on that graphic and click on that listing and hopefully see what else you have to offer. One of the reasons I do recommend this is because, you know, someone might see this and see that it's a white shirt, and not everyone likes white shirts. And they might say, oh, I'm going to pass on that because it's in white. But if you've put on your mock-up photo that there are more colors and styles available, then they'll be more likely to click on it and say, oh, okay, I can see what else they offer. Maybe they offer tank tops and long sleeves. Maybe they have this for men and children, and so on and so forth. So once again, we would just hit File and Export, and we would be ready to go. Now I'm going to actually save this more styles and colors that we have for next time. So I'm just going to select that and hit the lock icon for that as well. And I'm going to uncheck them. And I'm going to uncheck the watermark. And I'm going to delete our background photo. And I'm going to delete our graphic from this part. Now, the next way that you are going to create a mock-up is if you have a mock-up that has a little bit of irregularities. Now, it's still the same as what we just did, but you're going to be creating your own mask layer, so to speak, to make things a little easier for you. So I'm going to click on the Place Image tool, and I'm going to go back over to that mock-up folder. And, okay. I'm going to do this with one of these canvas mock-ups because this is probably the best example that I can use. So this is, again, a flat layout that I got off of Etsy. Now, one of the problems with these types of flat layouts, if you're doing something that is a full bleed design, is that it may not, actually no, sorry. I'm going to replace this with the other canvas one. There we go, because this one will work a little bit better for what I'm trying to explain. So if you're trying to do something that's a full bleed, you're going to find that these little edges are not necessarily going to line up. And no matter how perfectly straight this person took this picture, your design might not work as well. It might not line up accordingly. And you want your mock-up to look real. That is what people are looking for. And if you use a fake mock-up, sometimes or if you use a poor quality mock-up, they're really noticeable, and then your customer is less likely to buy. So again, your goal with mock-ups, with setting that opacity like I just showed you, with using some sort of a curve to refine everything like I'm going to show you now, is all to help you have a more professional and realistic looking product. So I'm going to make sure that I drag this down below my watermark layer and my text layer that I created, because we want it on the bottom. We're going to hit the place image tool, and I'm going to go back over to my graphics, and we'll use one of these that's going to be in the Celebrate 20K bundle that I'm going to have out here soon. Okay, so when we stretch this the way that it should be, it doesn't really fit on our canvas. But when we print it, it is going to fit on our canvas. It's just the difference in working with a flat layout that's been photographed by someone and with working with a physical product. So of course there's going to be some differences that we can't really translate in a design program. So I know it's a little hard to see because the canvas is white and so is the background, but if we just kind of drag that over, we're going to get near the edge. Now the problem is that when we look at this, when we zoom in, you can see that we're not even getting straight. Let's see. We're not lined up straight here, and it might not be that noticeable to the naked eye, but it is still noticeable that this is obviously not straight. And therefore it kind of takes away your credibility in trying to make this look real. So the way that we do this, the way that we fix this, is by creating a curve that we can add our photo into. So I'm just going to move our graphic over so that it's out of the way, and we're going to create that curve by clicking on the pen tool. And we're basically just going to create lines based on the canvas. So I'm going to select there at the bottom corner and go to the next one. Scroll up, go to that one, and the next one, and then all the way back down. Now, for this particular graphic, it is relatively straight, all the lines. We're just going to kind of move down a little bit. And because I selected on the corners, it already made that slight slope it's just so subtle that we can't really see it unless we're really looking for it. But trust me, some customers are just jerks like that. Now, if we go down here, we'll see that our line here is, it looks like it's right on the wood, but it's going to be a little hard to tell until we fill it. So the way that we fill a curve, we've created our curve. We make sure that our curve has no color. And we're going to click on our graphic. We'll move it back over here so it's in the appropriate place. And then we're going to click and drag underneath the word curve. Remember, you don't want it underneath the icon because then it's just going to be a bottom layer. We want it nested inside the curve because that's going to clip it to the canvas that we've created. So now it's clipped in there, we can see that we have some adjustments that need to be made. So I'm going to start by just moving this up to the top corner. And I'm going to increase the size of my graphic just a little bit because we want it to appear like it has gotten an edge-to-edge bleed on our canvas, because that's how we would sell this to our customer. So we'll make sure that we have curve clicked on. And it looks like our line is pretty straight at the top. Again, because we utilize the pen tool to click on the different corners, it automatically created the slope. So we're good there. Now we'll look along our edges and we can see the shadow that already came with the mock-up. And then down here on the bottom, Down here on the bottom, it's going to be a little difficult for you guys to see, but if you look right here, it looks like the wood is forward of the graphic, and that's how it would be when this was actually printed and sent to your customer. But if we look on this corner, we need a little bit of an adjustment. It shows that it is forward. It shows that the canvas is forward of the wood. It's so subtle, but it may get noticed. And again, our goal is to try and create the most professional looking mock-up that's going to be representative of what we are going to give to our customer. So I'm going to click on the curve in the layers panel, and then I'm going to click on the node tool. And if we click on that corner, we can just use our arrow key to tap that up and bring it in just a little bit. And we'll click back to our arrow. And just like that, we've resolved that issue. Now, the last thing that we want to do, again, is just adjust our opacity of our graphic itself. So I made sure to click on the graphic. And I'm just going to adjust it down about, I'm going to go a little closer to 20%, just because, again, when we export this, it's going to look a lot brighter than it is. And also, because I want to make sure it is representative of canvas that will be printed, which even though that sublimation canvas does look very bright and beautiful, it's not going to look so bright and beautiful that it looks fake. So the last thing that we'll do, because we've created this watermark file that we can work in, is just recheck our little boxes. And now it's already watermarked, and then you can actually change this text here. I have to unlock it before we can change it. We'll change this text here and we'll say custom size and stain available. And just like that, we are ready to export. Now I know that showing this on a rectangle was very basic, but I wanted to make sure to show you guys the option to create a curve and adjust a curve, because you never know when this might come in handy. It's great for something like this, but maybe you'll have sort of an odd shaped object that you want to create your own mock-up for, and that's how you do it. You use the pen tool to create a curve layer that it matches the external part. All right, so the last part I'm going to show you is, let me just uncheck our watermark parts, is how to utilize the PSD Mockups in Affinity Designer. Now, Affinity Designer does have the ability to open up Photoshop files. It can open up AI and PSD files for the most part. Sometimes I do run into a file that won't open, but it does advertise that it's supposed to be able to open those types of files. So if you're familiar with Styled Mockups on Etsy, they are an outstanding company that has Photoshop mockups with smart layers, which gives you a much more realistic representation of your product, because there's certain features like the texture of the fabric that are incorporated into those smart layers. If you're using Photoshop, they're easy to open and you can really take advantage of all the features that a smart mockup has. But since we're using Affinity Designer, and I'll be showing this in other programs as well, there will be some limitations that you work around, but you'll still be able to get a great mockup. I want to actually keep my graphic because it'll work great for what I'm going to show you next. So I'm just going to click and drag that out of the curve. I'm going to delete that curve. I'm going to delete our canvas background, and I'm going to move our graphic off to the side. You can't see this because we did that clip to canvas option. So I'm going to hit, view mode and unselect clip to canvas just so you guys can see it. Once again, I'll click on that place image tool. And we're going to go to our mockup blanks. And I'm going to choose one of the mockups from Styled Mockup Photography. All right, we're going to do her garden flag one. So this is the PSD file that's available. Now you can actually just open this file directly, but I do it this way because I find it's a little bit easier. So you can't edit this. You can't edit this file as it is because this is considered an embedded document. And I don't know. Okay, so if I drag this over so you can see the layers panel fully, you'll see that it says embedded document right there. Anytime something says it's an embedded document, it means just that. It is a document that's embedded within the document that you are working on. And the way that you access the embedded document is simply to double click it and it will open in a new tab. So when we open it in a new tab, we can see all of these layers that are available. Now, if you wanted to change the background of this, you could change the background. Maybe you want to use your own garden. I don't have a good picture to swap out for the background. But a lot of the mock-ups from Styled Mockups comes with a neutral background that's just sort of like a grayish purple cloud looking thing. So that is where you might want to add a wood background or a car, the car cup holder background or your own landscape photography, things like that that you want to incorporate into the mock-up to make it more personalized for you. So we'll just leave that where it is. Now, she does have little instructions here. It says place your background image here. So you'll notice again that this layer is above her background layer. So if we were to import a new background and stick it there, that's where it would be. And just to show you this, even though it's not what I would do for a garden flag, obviously, I'm just going to pick a wood background. So now that's in our background. Again, this is obviously not, this pink brick is not something I would use for a garden flag mock-up because this looks very fake. But just so you guys know, that is how you would add your own background. And you can add any background you want as long as you make sure that it's, right here where this place your own background here is and below your fabric shading and image area. Now I think that this is a little hard to see because it is so pink, so I'm actually just going to remove that. I just wanted to make sure I showed it to you guys. This is labeled as the hook, and if you didn't want to see that hook, you could uncheck it and not have it there. This is a great option if you just wanted to be able to use the garden flag itself and maybe you want to shift it to make it look like it's laying on a piece of wood. So just something to keep in mind. These are really fun to play around with. So if we click on the little arrow for our image area, you'll see that you've got two options here. The first one is click this icon to add art. This works in Photoshop. And then it says right on here, non-Photoshop users place image here. Makes it really easy. So I'm going to click back over to this file because I actually wanted the be rooted deep and stand tall or stand one. I'm going to cut and click back over to our workspace and paste. Okay. Now I'll just resize this. And remember how I just showed you, I kind of had to stretch this out to make it work with that canvas wall hanging, but it's actually sized accordingly for the garden flag pretty perfectly. Now this is not in our image area where it needs to be. You can see it's right here on the top layer. So we're going to click and drag that down into that image area. Again, you want to make sure that you are underneath the name, not the icon, the name. And when we do that, it automatically, here we go, it automatically has fit into the space. So in the last part of this video, I just showed you guys how to create a curve to clip your graphic in. This image area is the exact same concept. It's just that it's already been created for you and it fits all of the curves of your garden flag, like this bottom layer right here. On top of that, I noticed that this needs to be stretched just a hair this way so that we can, yeah, there we go. See, it's all edge to edge now, except it's not right here in this corner. So I'm going to click on it again and just stretch that just a tiny bit. There we go. Now we've got that edge to edge look that we're looking for. Now, one of the cool parts about the mock-ups from Styled Mockups on Etsy is that because they are what's called smart object mock-ups, they have cool features like texture. So you see where this says fabric shading? That is this texture that we see, hopefully you guys can see, over top of this that gives this mock-up a very realistic look. So Styled Mockups has something like 400 different mock-ups for all types of products, the majority of which are sublimation. So I know a lot of you get frustrated because you can't find some sort of styled photography that will work for really obscure sublimation items like wallets, but she has you covered. And if you check the description for this video, you'll see that there is a discount code for, I believe it's 10% off any purchase that you can use. And Barb from Styled Mockups provided that for us, and we're so grateful for that. I'm grateful that anyone wants to give anything to this group. I think you guys are amazing. I think what we do is amazing. But when other people recognize that too, it is just amazing. So you'll see that we have that great textured layer. And like I said, that creates a much more realistic look for your end product. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned before we get off that I should have is you might notice that some of the PNG graphics look a little jaggedy when they're imported. That's something about Affinity Designer that they've been working on fixing, but when you export this, it won't look like that. It will look smooth the way it's supposed to look. So just don't get too hung up on that particular thing. So we've got this all ready to go, and we'll just go ahead and exit out of that document, and all of the changes that we made to our embedded document are going to be visible on our actual design file. So now we're back in our watermarked file. And all we have to do is add in that watermark layer. And so this is a good example of one where we might want to change the color of the text. So that watermark layer, our come on dude, kind of gets lost in the background. So this is a great chance we can turn this up to white. There we go. And it's much more visible and is going to protect our graphic a lot better, especially on these darker flowers. So once again, this is something you just play around with, and each one you might have to make just a few little minor changes like that, like editing the colors, and you're good to go. Now, I don't really have anything that I would put, for that little special notice thing, but maybe if this was a personalized garden flag, you could put personalize me, or if you offer double-sided and single-sided, you could put double-sided and single-sided in that text box. But if you don't want to have the text box, you just uncheck it, and you are ready to go. Now, just one more time, I'll do that view mode, clip to canvas, so you can see this is what will be exported when we export it. So we'll just go File, Export, and Watermark, garden flag. I'm just trying to keep it easy. So. Alright, as you can see, creating a mock-up and watermarking anything in Affinity Designer is relatively easy. I know this video was a little bit longer than we normally do because I did cover multiple different things, but I hope that you found it helpful. And once again, don't forget to head over to Styled Mockups on Etsy and grab some of your favorite mockups for your favorite sublimation products, all with that discount code that is in the description for this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the day.